Hi, welcome to our home bar. Welcome to our YouTube channel, Wise Whiskey. I'm Tony, and today we're going to do a blind tasting and ranking of Westward whiskey. A Westward whiskey is out of Portland, Oregon, and I think they make some of the most unique and best whiskeys in the world. And I really think they were an important brand for my particular I hate saying whiskey journey, but I don't know what else to call it. My appreciation for single malt whiskey and what led to really loving Scotch and kind of focusing more on that whiskey these days personally, all really came from trying Westward. It was right at about a year ago now. There's an annual show that we would go to every year in Houston the last couple of years. And my wife and I were there with my parents and our daughter, and they kept our daughter for the night. So we got a little date night, and we went to this great bar in downtown Houston called Reserve 101. Killer cocktail bar and an amazing whiskey collection. And one of the whiskeys we tried was the Westward American Single Malt, just the classic Westward. And it had such a unique flavor to it. It is kind of like coffee shop mocha. It's sweet, but it's not in your face sweet like bourbon is. And even though bourbon has those vanilla and caramel and brown sugar notes, there's also a lot of times heat and just like a thinner, kind of more aggressive thing with bourbon. And I love bourbon, so I'm not saying that in like a super negative way, but it's just, I get with single malt whiskeys, American single malt, and with Scotch, I often get a rounder, softer, more subtly sweet, but also the sweetness carries through a little more. I don't know. It's just hard to explain if you haven't tried them kind of against each other. But that whiskey really changed and I started kind of getting into American single malt, and it had me diving into Scotch more. And it just, in the last year, I have focused way more on getting bottles of Scotch and American single malt and really just Scotch. I haven't dove near as much into the American single malt. I really used it as a springboard straight into like, well, if I like American single malt, I've got to like single malt. And I just really dove into Scotch. And it took a couple months and my palate just really went there. And for a little while, I was drinking so much of it that when I came back to bourbon and rye, all I could taste was oak and nothing else. And luckily, I've gotten past that. And I am really enjoying bourbon and rye again as well. But there is just something about single malt whiskey that I really love. And so what I have here today is 3 of the core offerings and 1 of the limited releases from them. So I've got the Westward, just original single malt whiskey, and this is 90%, or 90 proof. I've got the Westward Stout Cask. This one is 92 proof, 46%, aged in American Stout Beer Cask. And then we've got the Pinot Noir cask finish, which is 90 proof, 45%, aged in Pacific Northwest Pinot Noir barrels. And then the limited release that I have is it's also finished in stout cask, but it's specifically finished in cask from Fort George Brewery, which I believe is a Pacific Northwest brewery. And it is bottled at 115 proof. So a significant 57.5%. So, that one might stick out in the blind just because it is a higher proof. So I want to rank them, see if I can guess which one is which. But honestly, I love everything Westward makes. And I was really in the mood to sip on some Westward. So I figured why not do a flight and get to sip on all of them at once. And so I'm going to taste them once through. Then I'll taste them again real quick in a different order. And then I'll give you guys a ranking, what I think is what. And I will reveal the results that my lovely wife set up for me here so that I can do that after. So let's go into number 1. So like I said, with all of the Westward whiskeys, I get this kind of mocha chocolatey note. Right when you first smell it, it smells a little funky, almost like feet. And I realize that feet is not a tasting note that anyone is looking for. Well, most people at least aren't looking for. Maybe that's another channel I can start. And it it quickly goes away to a malty kind of earthy note that really gets more chocolatey and sweeter as you go back to it. And each time you go back to it, this whiskey changes when you smell it and when you taste it. We had a friend over the other night, and I was having her try the Pinot Noir cask. And when I first said the feet thing, she was thrown off. And then she's like, oh my God, I kind of get it. But then she would go back, and she's like, you're right. It's turning like chocolatey and coffee. And then she'd have a sip, and she's like, wow, I get that one note. And I said, but go back to it. And now that night kind of goes away, and there's like a fruitiness, and there's like this whole thing. And she really got each note as she tried it. And it was awesome to see. I love when people who are newer to tasting can kind of follow along and find the notes and stuff. And these whiskeys present some really unique flavor profiles without being overly harsh or heavy. And so I find that they are really good for tasting with people even who aren't super used to tasting. So yeah, we've got those kind of mocha notes. Maybe a little bit of like a breadiness behind there as well. Something a little more savory. Maybe a little bit of fruit. Hard to tell if I'm picking up a fruit note on that or if I'm imagining it. I never sip too much on the first one. God, these whiskeys are so good. Just because once I go through the rest, my palate will be a little more adjusted and I can go back to that. But my gosh, like a chocolate donut. Yeah, like chocolate donut. Maybe a little bit of spice as well. I don't remember getting that spice note a lot from Westward. That could be proof that I'm picking up, and this is the higher proof one. But again, first one I've tried today. We're going to save some of that and come back to it. Take a sip of our Guinness to cleanse the palate, and we're going to move into the next one. I will also say all the Westward whiskeys are very good. I've never tried anything from them I don't like. They are typically around the $90 to $100 mark for a bottle, and some of their limited releases are higher. And that is a high price to pay. I am not someone who easily spends that much on a bottle. It takes a lot for me to be comfortable doing that. I do think these whiskeys deliver and are worth a price point. I do think they're really unique and offering something different. If you have the money, I do think that these are totally worth the price point. At least grabbing one, but I can understand if people balk at that price point. I just wanted to mention that as well. I am sensitive to price, and I do really kind of gravitate towards finding great value and finding really good deals, finding great everyday sippers. These don't really fit into that. I can say that my wife and I don't have the budget to sip on $90 bottles every day. But my gosh, they are good to go back to from time to time. Okay, number 2. So this is giving me a little bit more of that kind of musty funk, that kind of earthiness from the barley. But now that I go back, it's turning into that mocha coffee note that I love. This is a little less sweet on the nose than this one was, and maybe a little bit more savory. Definitely a little bit more subdued on the palate. This first one, like I said, chocolate donut, right? Just really nice, really good. This is nice, but it's a little more restrained. A touch of that spice still there, which is interesting because I don't really remember getting that note. There's a little bit of warmth, a little bit of spice to it. The mocha note is a little more bitter, like there's some coffee mixed in with it. A little less pastry or dessert, sweet. It has a little bit less mouthfeel and a little bit less finish to it as well. It's a nice pour of whiskey. I do like the first one better on this first round. Now see, this one reminds me a little more of the first one. That same kind of mocha note. They are really similar with that main note. But this does seem to have some sweetness behind it as well. Maybe some fruitiness or like some kind of pastry doughy bready notes, but slightly sweet with them. That's interesting. This one kind of seems to hit in between these two. A little more rich, a little bit more body, a little bit more complexity than the last one, but not delivering the full sweetness and the full scope of what the first one did. God, I have to tell you, the smell coming from having all four of these together is just incredible. It smells like dessert back here. It's just so interesting when you try these whiskeys and when you try scotches that can be on the sweeter side. I guess it's the difference in like really good like cream cheese or like buttercream frosting versus that really cheap out of a can frosting. They're both good on a cake and they have their places, right? But that cream cheese or buttercream frosting, there's a little bit of richness and body and like roundness to that flavor that keeps it from just being sweet. There's something more redeeming to it than just in-your-face sweetness. While that other frosting is going to be real sugary, real sweet up front, and a little more abrasive, and it can almost be sharp from that. And I'm not saying that bourbon is abrasive or sharp, but the sweetness that I get in bourbons and ryes compared to what I get in single malts kind of reminds me of that. There's just a soft, rounded complexity to the sweetness that almost makes them, even though they're definitely less sweet, it almost makes them seem more dessert-like and sweeter because I think they extenuate the other flavor profiles that are going on in those whiskeys better, and they don't fight against them like sometimes the really intense brash whiskeys do. I don't know if any of that made any sense. I wasn't planning on talking about that, but it is something that I just have noticed where I love sweet notes in whiskey. I have a huge sweet tooth, and I love finding sweet notes in whiskey, but I really enjoy when that sweetness is rounded and balanced out and is in harmony with the rest of the whiskey. Let's go on to number 4. This has a little less of the mocha and chocolate note. A little bit more of a burn on my nose, making me wonder if this is the highest proof one, just because it does seem a little more ethanol forward on the nose. Yeah, some of that breadiness is still there, but there is a sting. I would say from the nose, I would guess this is the highest proof. Okay. Man. My immediate thought with that was honey, nougat. Some of that coffee and mocha note is lingering. It also had a mouthfeel that I don't think, maybe the first one had a bit of, but number 2 and 3 didn't. There's a viscosity there that the other whiskeys don't have. There is a little bit of a finish with this one that I also don't think the other ones have. It does stay within some of those chocolatey mocha notes. There's some spice and there's just a little bit more to this one than the others. It's really interesting so far. I would say that number 1 is my favorite first round. I would say that number 2, my least favorite. This guy's a close second place and this one's third place going on. Similar flavor profiles. The biggest difference is the richness, the mouthfeel, the complexity. These two just don't quite have it. This one almost feels like it. I think this is probably that 114 proof or 115 proof, whatever it was. There's just, it's nice. But man, number 1 blew me away. So we're going to go back through, but in a different order. I'm going to kind of hopscotch back around to try these again, and then I will give you my final thoughts and go through the results. We'll go a lot quicker on the second round as well. So let's go back to number 2, palate cleanser. See, this smells very honey forward as well now. Chocolatey, soft, very one-dimensional. I'm going to improve my score from the first time. Nothing's out of place, and there's enough there to really like it, but it does just kind of fall flat. Go back to number 3. Yeah. Just a little bit more of that mocha coffee note. A little bit more mouthfeel than the last one. Not significantly better, but I do think just a step up. Just a step up. We'll go to number 4 again. Yeah, this nose is still the most different of the 4 noses. It's a little fruity this time. That one has more mouthfeel and complexity. It goes into a slightly different... Yeah, it's got more going on. But I think it's the proof. I really think this one is that 114 or 115 proof St. George's cask. Yeah, 115 proof. It doesn't drink like 115 proof. It drinks softer than that. This is tough, man. Let's go back to number 1 that I like so much in the beginning. I mean, the chocolate in this one is just over the top. I do think there's probably something behind that chocolate now. You know, I know that one of these is Pinot Noir cast finished. I'm thinking it's this one because it has a softer mouthfeel, but it doesn't seem as proofy as this one. I'm wondering if that extra sweetness, that richness I'm getting is maybe kind of a fruity note that I'm just having a harder time picking out because of the fact that it is chocolate and mocha forward. I do think there's some fruit in this one. Man, it is just... It's so good. Okay. In last place, I have number 2. And I'm thinking that number 2 is just the regular Westward. Okay. You know, originally because of the complexity and the richness, I had this one scoring better. But in all honesty, it had more to it where objectively I could tell you this is a little bit... I think this is probably a little bit more aged or higher proof, a little bit richer whiskey. But in this tasting, that complexity, I don't know that it paid off in a way that made it more enjoyable. I'm really torn with 3 and 4. I don't, we're going to call them tied for 2nd/3rd. I think number 3 is probably the stout. I think number 4 is probably the St. George, which makes number 1 first place, and which makes this one, I believe, the Pinot Noir cask. So, let's see how we did. Okay, in last place, I had number 2. That was the stout cask. So, I was wrong with the stout cask. I had number 3 and 4 tied. I thought that number 3 was the stout cask. It was the original, so I had these two switched. I thought number 4 was the St. George Stout, the exclusive release. It's higher proof, and I was correct with that. And number 1 was my favorite. I thought was the Pinot Noir cask. And I will tell you, I understand that $90 to $100 is not a cheap pour of whiskey. But man, there are not many whiskeys being made in America today. I honestly believe this, that as a core release are better. Just an everyday bottle you can get all the time on their website. You can order it now and ship it as long as you live in the right state. Man, the Westward Pinot Noir cask finish is so dang delicious. It is dessert in a glass. It's like chocolate donuts, and then there's like a little bit of fruit behind it as well. It is just so good. I cannot stress enough. I think this is just one of the best whiskeys being made in the country, really in the world. I mean, I think it's so unique to anything else. The closest thing I just the other day got to have a chance to try Glenmorangie Signet, which is like a $280 to $300 bottle of scotch. I was at a bar out of town, and I saw it on the shelf and made it and just asked, hey, what would that cost? And the guy told me it wasn't in the system and he would do it for $30 for a pour. And it probably should have been like a $150 pour, if we're being honest. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I tried not to act like I was surprised by that number. And I said, yeah, I'll do one of those. And so I got to try a full pour of Glenmorangie Signet for like a fifth of the cost of what it should have been. And it was delicious. It was chocolatey. It was like dessert. It had so many of the same notes. But we're talking about a bottle that's 3 to 4 times as much money, that is like rumored to be upwards of, there's some whiskeys in that they're supposedly like 30 to 40 years old. They're using specialty barley. It's like a really, really high end, really unique, really, kind of a show stopping whiskey that's put out by a major brand like Glenmorangie, and worth the money, by the way. Never do I try really high dollar bottles and think, yeah, that was worth it. And I can tell you that when I've got a couple, $300 to blow, I'm probably getting a bottle of Signet. It was that good. But man, this Westward at 90, the Westward Pinot Noir, it delivers a lot of the same notes that Signet did. Just the chocolatey dessert note, the richness, the little bit of fruit and other sweetness there. You cannot go wrong with this bottle. If you've got the budget, I highly recommend it. I think these guys are doing some of the coolest stuff that's happening right now in whiskey, and I am such a fan. This is one of the best tasting blinds I've ever done, and I'm kind of mad at myself that I've owned most of these bottles for about a year, and I've never done this before. But that is all for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you've tried the Westward stuff yourselves, please, in the comments, let me know what you liked best, which whiskey you prefer from Westward. If you appreciate what we're doing, please like this video. If you want to help us out and support us so we can keep going, please subscribe to the channel. And until next time, as always, please drink responsibly, drink respectfully. Most of all, have fun doing it. Thank you for joining me. Cheers.